and welcome to Round Robin. I'm your host, Robin McCormick with the City of Hampton, and today we are going to talk about a relatively new program that looks at diversity topics through movies. My guest is Latiesha Handie from the Citizens Unity Commission, welcome, and Rita Scrivener from the library, because this is a partnership. What is this all about?
Well, we are so glad you asked. And first, let me thank Hampton Library System for the partnership, because we definitely wouldn't have been able to provide a safe space on our own, since our department is very small, and we are always looking for venue partnership opportunities and that align with the vision of those departments. So Movie Talks really came to be as a conversation catalyst for diverse people to come together to talk about things that we see naturally in our community when we talk about differences and similarities, as in race, religion, culture, ethnicity, and just the other cultural things that you would see that are living and breathing in community. And we actually, I think we started our partnership in 2017 with the Hampton Library System, and it was actually something that was built out of Movie and a Mic. So that was a program that we had that predates me and my assignment to oversee the department. But with Movie and the Mic, it was traditionally hosted at Cinebistro, and that partnership faded away. And so for a while, the program became dormant. Mm-hmm. But when we partnered with the library to talk about other opportunities of advancement to getting people in the community together to host these dialogues, Movie and a Mic seemed to be a natural fit.
Well, you know, one change is when you're at the library, it's kind of free, right? And when you're in a theater, you got to rent the space or, you know, pay for that. So this makes it a lot more accessible to a lot of people.
Yes, that's true. And I think the Cinebistro was a wonderful venue, of course.
Oh, comfy.
Oh, yes, yes, indeed. But the library does bring other things to the table. It's already well known as a place that is welcoming to everyone, and as Latiesha said, is a safe space for everyone, and it's a place for learning. Because I think sometimes with topics of diversity, they might be things that people don't want to talk about because they're afraid of what they don't know. And I think that's something that everyone can identify with. And this is a place where no one is expected to know all the answers, you know, and to not make any mistakes. It's just a place to find out what you don't know and to learn about it. Because I think that we all have things that we have thought were one way, and then we find out we were wrong. And the only mistake at that point would be to not acknowledge when we are wrong.
Well, and you're reacting to something. You have this common thing that is the movie, and you can talk about what it made you feel or think about, and you're not necessarily just opening the window to here's my view on everything, or, you know, you can open yourself up as much as you want to.
That's true, and I think one of the hardest things about just I think life in general is just walking in someone else's shoes. Mm-hmm. You know, it's something you can really try hard to do and really want to do, and it's hard to find opportunities to.
But movies and books are one of the main ways that we all learn to do that.
We sure do. Movies are such a great way to see life through someone else's eyes, and that's also something that opens the door for discussion, because I just had another movie program last night, and I was talking to one of our patrons about how, you know how after you leave the movie theater you talk with your friends in the parking lot?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And I probably said this anecdote before, because I think I've thought about it so much, where sometimes that's the best part. Mm-hmm. And I sort of think of these discussions that we have as kind of the parking lot discussion.
The parking lot, you go out for coffee or a drink. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you have to process it. I do that when I finish a book. I do that. I'm like, I have to find somebody who read this book so I can talk about it. But with a movie, you're all doing it at the same time. So what are some movies that you guys have talked about, and, you know, without how did some of the discussions go? Like, what did people have to say?
Well, most of our our conversations or movie topics come from diverse topics in general. So one of the movies that we just recently showed was Misrepresentation, where it depicted the disempowerment of women, and it showed different social stories that people were able to pick up on and relate to have a more broader discussion.
So was this a documentary? I'm not terribly familiar. Or,
Yes,
okay.
it was a documentary, and at some time in the summer, I think it was in the summer, Rita and I came together to kind of dialogue about what movies should be shown. So if they should depict real life images, if it should be a known featured film, or what was it that we were trying to accomplish. So we kind of segued into a documentary format so that we could look at real life stories that impact today's generation. And so that's what Misrepresentation was. It was actual stories from people in lived experience of disempowerment or social injustices for women.
So were men comfortable in this? Was it predominantly a female audience? Like how did the discussion play out?
Whew. Well, I'll tell you that we have a very mixed group. And so there was an even balance of male and female participants or attendees. And quite naturally, I think that men in the room listened to understand, because it was a perspective that they could not identify with as being the male gender first-handedly, right. So I think that it was beautiful to see the fact that they weren't trying to give suggestions or judgments or biases against the opinions that were being shared, and they were kind enough to allow those voices to be explored in the room, and even at some point offered empathy. I don't know how you went through this. I can't believe that this is the narrative that's being spun in the life of women. So it was just nice to see that they were supportive and that they really wanted to understand the social complications that women face.
Interesting. So what other movies?
Well, we started with actually a filmmaker contacted me a couple years ago, a gentleman named Craig Dudnick from Illinois, and he was doing a nationwide tour of a film that he had made about the activist Alice Tregay, and his film is called Alice's Ordinary People, and it was about her nonpartisan voter education program that got so many people, thousands of people registered to vote, and her lifelong work to educate people in the political system, both on the local, state, federal level. Just a really wonderful individual. And he actually had the opportunity to interview her shortly before she passed away, and many people who knew her. And so it was a wonderful film. And even though it didn't have the local connection, it brought something to us from somewhere that we might not know a lot about, and someone we might not have ever had the opportunity to learn about, from someone who knew her and from someone who'd made a film about her. And the Unity Commission was generous enough to pay for him to come to the library, and it was just a wonderful event. And the movies since then have not had the filmmaker present, but it's not out of the question that might happen again.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And hearing from someone who, obviously major commitment of time and energy to make that movie. What era was she doing this in?
Well, she was retiring right around the time that then Senator Obama was early in his career, and so I believe she was active from the 50s or 60s onward.
So during some pretty difficult times when voter registration among some groups was not an easy thing to do.
Right.
So that would have been probably speaking to people of color primarily, lower income people, groups that weren't welcomed into the political system.
Right. And you saw the work at hand in marginalized communities where they were putting people in activation mode, that it was time to stand up for a cause, that it was time to get serious about voting and knowing your rights and standing up for those things that be. And so you're right, it was during very difficult times where there was a sense of hope that was being instilled in the community because of the movement of this young lady.
And isn't it interesting, and I don't want to discuss politics, but those themes came up in this year's elections, particularly in the South and in Georgia and Alabama and places where people had felt disenfranchised, even though legally they could register to vote. They had felt their vote didn't make a difference, or they had not been exercising their right to vote, just because of the sort of generations and legacy of not being enough or not feeling like they were empowered.
Right.
To think it's 2018.
Right. And I think your comment resonates with us all in some way. And as you stated about being leery of discussing the politic of a thing, but just the statement alone speaks volumes. And you do have to begin to look at it through your own lens of, hey, what does this look like for all people?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Right.
yeah.
So how do you reach people? How do you encourage people to come out? How often are these held? Let's get people out.
Oh, well, we just do a song and dance.
You probably would, Latiesha. You would do anything to get people to come out to your events. I know you would.
Standing with the sign, come on in. But one of the things that we do in partnership is we work with the marketing department.
Yes.
And marketing and outreach has been very instrumental in making sure that we spread the word throughout city services. And then we do what we can on the foot, I say on the pavement. We put foot to pavement in getting the information to libraries, community centers, social media. Social media is a very big thing where we try to list the event there. It's free, open to the public. We give you popcorn, so we try to bring people in with food. Come eat bread with us. But also we use the word of mouth. So we use our commissioners as well to spread the words within their realms of influence. But I'm not sure. What else do we do?
About 4 times a year. Mm-hmm. First thing I always say is subscribe to eNews, hampton.gov/eNews. Yes. But then once you subscribe, you still got to open the email and read it, which
open the email.
Only about 40% of the people do each week, so you still have to do that. You can go to hampton.gov/Unity.
Mm-hmm.
You can get text alert. There's a whole bunch of different ways you can stay in touch and find out what's going on. It'll be on the library page. It'll be on the Unity page. There's posters up. But there's so much going on. Sometimes I think it overwhelms people. But stay in touch, because there's a lot of stuff. And don't be afraid. I think sometimes people hear, first of all, documentary, and they think, oh, I have to think, that's not going to be fun. Those are still, today's documentaries are still stories that are being told in a filmmaking sort of way.
Right.
And also, people might be afraid to discuss. You don't have to say anything if you don't want to, right?
Right.
Don't if you're not comfortable, don't talk. Just sit and listen. But I think people will be more comfortable than they think they will be.
Definitely.
Okay. Come out, learn something, meet new people.
Yes.
All right. Thank you both very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you for watching. I hope we will see you at one of these movie talks soon.